It has been almost 4 months since I last made a video about every single Canadian Prime Minister's biggest mistake in office. So today, we're going to go over their greatest accomplishment as the Prime Minister of Canada. Well, of course, we're going to start off with our first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald. And while I don't agree with the reason why the Red River Rebellion came up, I do think that putting down the rebellion was one of, if not the biggest accomplishment by Sir John A. Macdonald. For only serving 5 years in the mid 1870s, Alexander Mackenzie actually did one of the best things Canada actually had during that time period, which was creating the Supreme Court of Canada, which of course has to be his biggest accomplishment in office. Next up is Sir John Abbott, and considering that he only spent such a short time as Prime Minister, his greatest accomplishment has less to do with how good he was, but more so how good John A. Macdonald was. Because under that 1 year term in office, there were 52 federal by elections. A by election is where there is a riding whose MP has either died or stepped down, and they're holding an election to try and find out who the new MP for that region is. For instance, there's one going on right now as I'm recording this in Toronto St. Paul's. Under John Abbott, there were 52 of those, and the Conservatives won 42. So good on him for that. Next up, it is Sir John Thompson, who died just 2 years into his term, and despite getting most praise from Canadian prime ministerial historians, myself included, not to brag or anything, but he actually didn't do that much. But I think his greatest accomplishment was assisting in the solving of the Northwest Territories schools question. That wouldn't be solved way after his death, but he tried to fix it. I don't know. Next up is Sir Mackenzie Bowell, who, despite serving 2 terms in office, hilariously, I have to say that his greatest accomplishment was listening to 99% of his cabinet and resigning from the office as prime minister just before the election of 1896. Sir Charles Tupper. Damn it. Uh, Resigning. Yeah, sure, resigning. But that comes after failing to accept the results of a fair election. Next up, Sir Wilfrid Laurier. His greatest accomplishment is constructing the railway. Now, there's 100 other things I could have picked for Laurier here because he was just one of the better ones in Canadian history. Hell, he's on the $5 bill. But I do think constructing the railway was the start of connecting Canada. And for a young nation at that point, that's exactly what you want. What's the name of the railway? I don't know. Ask Daniel the trainer. He'll probably know. And now we come to objectively the worst prime minister in Canadian history, Sir Robert Borden. Now, the people who haven't watched me before are going to be like, what? Robert Borden's my favorite. Okay, shut up. Okay, he did nothing good. Well, sure, he got us into World War One, and that's what I did put down. But it's not like we're part of the British Empire, which would drag us in anyways. And there's gonna be people who say, "Oh, getting the women right to vote." Yeah, Borden is so good that he gave women the right to vote in his second last year in office. So good. Despite only serving 1.5 years, Arthur Meehan actually had a good accomplishment. It's not like Tupper, okay, who was in there for like 2 months and just resigned. Arthur Meehan actually did something, and that was cutting government spending to corporations to due to the 1920-21 depression. I imagine everyone was depressed because they have to tell their grandkids that they voted for Robert Borden. There's a ton of things I can say about the man on the $50 bill, William Lyon Mackenzie King. But I have to say that his greatest accomplishment would be leading us through World War II. Because there's a million other things that could have happened with a less competent leader. So, William Lyon Mackenzie King had to go under all of that stress to keep us as a free country. So that's why William Lyon Mackenzie King deserves to be on the $50 bill, unlike that godforsaken Borden. Prime Minister R.B. Bennett is not a good one. However, I do think getting out of the Great Depression would have to be the best one for him, despite a lot of economic troubles. Even when we got out of it in 32, there was a lot of economic troubles. The country was not economically stable for a long time, but technically we were not in Great Depression levels of economic disparity. Um, but so good on him for that. But still, I mean, there's not really a silver lining to this at all. The late 40s, the 50s, and to an extent the early 60s were filled with making highways so everyone could go around easier. And Prime Minister Louis Saint Laurent's greatest accomplishment was continuing this by building the Trans Canada National Highway. I do know the name of this one. So, yeah, that's the biggest accomplishment for Louis Saint Laurent is helping, again, connect Canada, which it's not really a young country anymore, but it still hasn't celebrated its 100th anniversary, so technically it kind of is. So, yeah, connecting Canada is obviously a good thing, no matter when it is and who it is. In my opinion, for John Diefenbaker, his greatest accomplishment would have to be sticking to his anti nuclear weapon stance, despite it being the main cause that he lost the election of 1968. Why I really like this one is because I'm also anti nuclear weapon. So, Diefenbaker, he had the right idea here. Unfortunately, the conservatives didn't, and the country didn't, and they elected his successor, who is Lester Pearson. And I honestly think that his greatest accomplishment is obvious. It's free healthcare. Anyone who disagrees, their name probably starts with E. It was under Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau that Canada officially became bilingual. And I'm not from Quebec, but I actually thank Trudeau for having to take 40 minutes away from my school day that I could potentially be doing math. I would much rather doing French. So thank you for that. But the greatest accomplishment under Trudeau is actually making Canada an independent country. That's right. Canada has only been an independent country for 42 years, effective the 17th of April, 1982. Surprise, surprise, Prime Minister Joe Clark, who served for 9 months, actually did something. He passed Bill C 15, which is the Freedom of the Access to Information Bill. And since it's kind of like the only thing he did, I don't know, I haven't looked into it. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's kind of like the only thing he did, so it kind of has to go here. Oh boy, here we go. John Turner did only 19 things in office. Make 19 patronage appointments. They were bad, but it's the only thing he did, so forgive me. Finally, a prime minister that lasted longer than 5 milliseconds. We got Brian Mulroney, who actually did quite a number of things, but I think the best thing he did happened right away, signing the North American Free Trade Agreement, which agreed to free trade with the United States and with Mexico. That's the best part, I think, that Brian Mulroney did in office. All right, back to the prime ministers who served for less than half of a millisecond. It's Kim Campbell, who served in 1993, whose biggest accomplishment would have to be cutting government ministries, because it's really the only effective thing she did in office. The next prime minister's biggest accomplishment, Jean Chrétien, really had nothing to do with anything he wanted to do, but it just kind of happened that federal taxes were lowered under the prime ministership of Jean Chrétien, so I have to say that that is probably his greatest achievement. Now, I personally am not affected by this, but I do believe Paul Martin legalizing gay marriage has to be the greatest achievement of his lackluster 3-year term in office. Prime Minister Stephen Harper's greatest achievement while being Prime Minister of Canada is lowering the national debt, which any Prime Minister can do, but Stephen Harper did it so much that it actually almost eliminated our national debt, which is obviously what we want. The current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has very, very many flaws. However, the one good thing he did was legalize marijuana for personal use. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a like if you agreed with me, and if you didn't agree, leave a like, and also comment down below. And subscribe to the channel. So thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.